Hello and welcome to this video. The topic, as you can see here, is layer basics, copy and paste. My name's Beckham. Now when we say copy and paste, it doesn't sound all that creative or exciting, does it? But when you think about it, copy and paste is what the clone tool does, it's what the healing brushes do, and also what the spot removal tool in Adobe Camera Raw does. So copy and paste may sound like a simple technique, but when we add this technique to Photoshop's layers, selections and masks, there's almost no end to what we can do. We can use these techniques to improve images that otherwise may have gone straight into the bin. Those images that, despite all our best efforts, something somewhere conspired to rob us of a great shot. An ugly highlight in the wrong place, or a broken branch when we're photographing a bird. And there's going to be many more examples we could list. Well, let's patch up the problem. It's a little bit like patching a hole in a pair of jeans, and while we're doing this, we learn a great deal more about layers. This is one of those techniques that I always say you can take to the bank. And what I mean by that is the technique is so useful we can use it again and again with many different images and many different subjects. Now there are times when we use this technique when perhaps we have to use 2 or 3 small patches because there's not enough detail in the picture for us to take one large patch. But the technique is exactly the same. Here I think we can possibly just get away with one patch. So how would we kill that enormous highlight in the bottom right corner? Now I think it may be useful if I bring out my layers onto the screen with the little option at the top which is called Expand Panels, so you can see what happens as we go through the technique. The next stage is to select one of the selection tools from the top of the toolbox on the left. I think the Freehand Lasso Tool, which is just titled, of course, the Lasso Tool, will do the job for us. But let's think about what we've got to do here. Now what we need to do is to find the pixels which are going to form the patch. Well, we have them all above here. So with my Freehand Lasso Tool selected, I'm going to make a selection along the edge of the bird and onto the branch, but I'm going to go down the center of the branch, I think, and then up the other side and back. I need to soften the edge of the selection, so I'm going to go to my Select and Mask option. We don't need to worry about hardly any of the settings here, only the feather. And that feather, well, I think that's going to work pretty well for us given the softness of the background. I'm going to just click OK to add that feather to that selection. Now I need to copy that selection to a new layer, or what is within the selection. The selection ring fences a number of pixels, and when I hit Ctrl J, well, you'll see them appear on the right hand side in the layers palette. If I go to the top of my toolbox and pick up my move tool, there you can see in fact we do have the patch, but I need to flip the patch vertically. I can do that with the edit tools, edit, transform, flip vertical, but you can see what I mean about having problems with the angle. So I can put that right with the free transform tool. We'll find that also in the edit menu or via the shortcut keys of Ctrl T. Once the bounding box is in place, I can move my cursor just outside and I can rotate it. I can click inside the bounding box and I can move it. And I'm going to stretch it just a little bit as we seem to be a tiny bit short, but not much. I want to make sure I haven't got a white area down there. Need a bit more rotation, a little bit more shuffling around, and maybe even just drag it out a bit more. You can see what I'm doing, just taking my time. I'm looking carefully at the edges, but when I'm happy that I've got a pretty good result, I'll hit the enter key to commit that change. Now I think I need to do just a little more work on the patch, but not very much. Maybe I can amalgamate both of these layers together to continue the work I want to do. Maybe you could save a Photoshop file to retain both layers if you wish, but I'm reasonably confident, I think, to go to the top right of the layers and choose to flatten the image. Because what I'd like to do here is just a little burning in of the edge of the branch, because I've copied detail from the top, which is light in tone, and I've pasted it on the bottom, so I could do with at least darkening the bottom. So let's have a go at that by picking up our burn tools from the toolbox. They're over here, they're grouped together with the dodge tool and the sponge tool, but we want to burn. Now I suppose it's a little bit of a toss-up whether we're talking here about highlights or mid-tones. We're probably talking a bit of both actually. So I'm going to select mid-tones to start with an exposure of 5%. So as always I'm using a standard soft edge brush. So I'm going to come at this in a really delicate way by just brushing along the highlights there, and just watching carefully the effect I'm putting into the image. And the tones are going down. There's a risk here that I could push the exposure up a bit more, but I think that's going to be just about right. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, make this just a little easier for myself, the brush a little smaller, and I'll brush along the edge a little more, and I'm going to take my time and just allow that to gradually come down in tone. Now there will come a time when I'm going to switch to the highlights. So let's do that now and just have a little touch along the edge of the highlights using the same settings. You can see how carefully I'm working, and I'm going to work along the entire length here. Now if we look very carefully at the timber up on the right hand side, we can see one or two little giveaways that we've been at work. We've got a mirror image there and a mirror image there. So this is when the spot healing brush is going to do the work for us. So I'll just touch in one or two of those on one side just to take away any concerns that we may have that the pixels that I've copied from the top half are showing up in my picture. They're clearly not. Now this sums up the copy and paste that I was talking about in the introduction to this video. With just a little bit of care, it works every time. At a recent demonstration, a member showed me this picture and asked if my copy and paste technique could remove the lit lamp from behind the guy's head. Well, yes it can, although it's a little bit more involved. We have to do this one stage at a time, and it wasn't best suited for a live demo. But in the interests of demonstrating the versatility of the technique, let me do this now. I'm going to start by zooming in to the background. The first thing we probably need to concentrate on is that player's advert in the background. We need to take one side of it, copy, paste and flip it to provide the other side. Sure, it's going to spoil the picture a little bit, but I think it's far enough in the background not to matter, and even if it did, we could just blur it a little more. So let's begin by making a selection. I'm going to use the Polygonal Lasso Tool. It's grouped with the Lasso Tool we used before. This is the one, Polygonal. because we've got some straight edges here, and I think it's going to be better to make the selection. So I'm going to start down, well, let me start at the top right corner. I'm going to click, and then move across to there, moving down just above the top of that clock and across to the left. I'm going to try and take the shadow if I can and join up with the start. We need to soften the edge of that selection just a little bit. Select and mask will allow us to do that. 3 pixels, well, that looks okay to me, so I'll click OK, and then using that Control J shortcut key, look over on the right hand side and you can see the little patch that I've created. We're going to need to flip it, and my guess is rotate it too. So let's begin with the flip. We can go to the edit menu, we can go to transform and flip horizontal. I can pick up my move tool. You can see, in fact, I am going to need to flip this around or turn it around. So we can use the Control T or the free transform tool to do this. And I'll turn it. Now, how much of this are we going to use? Because we could get right across here and possibly do quite a bit of this. And let's take it to about that point there. Then when we copy some of this above, we can bring that down to the edge. This little white area here, we can possibly just drop that in with one of the clone tools or the healing brushes. That doesn't look too bad to me, so I'm going to hit the tick on the options bar to commit that change. Just for a moment, and just for fun I suppose, let's hit Control 0 and see if we'd get away with that in the picture when it's complete. To be honest, I think we probably would. Okay, in that case, then let's pick up the zoom tool and zoom back in and think about what we've got to do next. If we have any areas along the edge that we can see, we need to blend them in, either with a layer mask, or if you're not familiar with masks, then use the eraser tool. What I'm going to do here is to save this as a Photoshop file. Always a good job to do this, or it's a good practice to get into. Save each stage of a project, especially when you're new to Photoshop, because it gives you an opportunity, if you make a mistake, to drop back easily to a previously saved version. Now, as you can see, I've zoomed in just a little bit here because the edge of the background advert is just encroaching on the guy's hair. If you're familiar with a layer mask, you can use one of those. I'm going to keep things simple and just select the eraser tool. Drop the eraser size down. I just want to erase that edge away, just to the edge of the guy's hair, just so that it looks natural. Once I've done that, then I'm happy to flatten those two layers together, because I've just saved this as Antiques Man 2. So at the top right, I can choose flatten, because what I want to do next is to do something with this little light area here. Now, I think possibly the best way to do that is maybe to just take another quick patch. It may be the quickest way to do this. So let me just pick up my Lasso Tool. If I just pick a patch there, feather the edge, select and mask, that looks good. Control J, and then with the move tool from the top of the toolbox, if I just drag that down, I think that's going to do the job. But once again, we've just got a little bit of erasing to do, just along the hair. Just take your time. Use a mask if you're familiar with a mask. And there we have it. And once again, simple change like that, I'm willing to flatten it. Little area there which might be a problem. So let's pick up our spot healing brush, make an appropriate size brush. We'll touch this just a few times just to see if we can merge that in a little bit better. And then take a look by just hitting Control 0. I think that's going to pass muster. So now we need to think about the lighter part just to the right of the player's advert. So I'm going to zoom in, but not quite so much this time, because we've got a problem here which we quite often have when we're using this technique. You'll notice that I probably need to take some of the corrugated iron behind this to make the next patch. But I've got what looks like nail marks or screw marks, and I've got this line running right through there. So what I'm going to do is eliminate those before I take some pixels from this location and drag them down. I'm going to do that by making a new blank layer over the top of the image. I'm going to select my spot healing brush, and I'm going to make sure from the top of the screen, the options, I've got the little box tick to sample all layers. What this means is I'm going to be fixing the problem on this image by a clone, really, but I'm going to clone all the pixels onto a new blank layer. No risk whatsoever. Let me demonstrate how it works by going back to that wire there, and we'll just click and see how well the repair goes. Click, click. I'm just holding the shift key and I'm cloning here between two straight lines. It does a superb job. I hope you'll agree. I'll take off the little dot that is probably a nail or a fixing in the wall, and while I'm there I'll tidy up some of the others as well. But what I now need to do, before I move on of course, is to put these two together. So if you really wanted to keep saving a project as you go, now would be the time to save project 3. Always a good thing to do until you build up confidence, and then you'll find you'll do this less and less. Top right, flatten to move on. So now I need to take possibly the final patch. Let's hope that's going to be the case, but we'll see. Because we've got a bit of shading here, I'm not sure I want to take that. So I'm really looking at this area here. So I've got a small patch and I think it may not be big enough, but we have a plan. Let's pick up our Polygonal Lasso Tool here. Going to draw down there, across to the edge of the jug, up and back. So there's the patch we're going to use. Let's soften it as we've done before and click OK, and before we do anything else, Control J to copy that to a new layer. Now I'm going to pick up my move tool from the top of the toolbox. Now we can move this into place. Now you can see the problem I have. That can go to about there, but I really got a little bit there that might be a problem, but I've got a little bit of a problem here. I think what I'm going to do is, I was trying to avoid using a mask here, but I think I may just use one. I'm going to put a mask on here. We do that from down the bottom left of the layers palette. If I spray black on the mask, which contains that patch, it's effectively the same as erasing pixels, but they're not entirely erased, they're just masked. So if I get it wrong, I can repair them. Let me demonstrate by going to my black as my foreground color, my brush tool. Going to make my brush big, and I just want to brush between those two areas so that I make the join between the two more acceptable, and I think that's worked pretty well. But of course the problem we have is the patch I was able to take isn't quite big enough. So what I often do under those circumstances is I make a copy of this patch and extend it. Now I suppose we could do that just by using the free transform tool, but let me demonstrate this technique because I've had to use this a number of times. I'm going to drag this down over the copy icon at the bottom right, and now I've got two patches, and if I pick up my move tool I can bring this one down well over the hair, somewhere like that. Now all I need to do on the top one is to use my mask, black as my foreground color, use my brush. Let me move the picture up. Now I can just mask this back very gently until I feel I've got a result. Now I'll make a deliberate mistake here. As you can see, I've gone back too far. And this is the beauty of using a mask. What I can do now is go back to my toolbox, right down the bottom, and instead of selecting black as my foreground colour, I'll select white. Now I can repair the little deliberate mistake that I made there, and hopefully we can produce an acceptable repair to the image in question. And once I've saved it once more, I can again flatten to finish the image, or to do any small changes that I think still remain. There are one or two. Let me pick up my spot healing brush. We've got a little highlight in the glass on the right, we'll remove that. Little area down at the left by the man's elbow, we'll remove that. And we've also got a little bit of a problem up here. We'll use the spot healing brush to remove that too. I'm doing this pretty quick and dirty, as you can see. Touch, 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 touch. But I think that's going to be good enough. If we zoom into the area we've been working in, there's only one area I think that I would like to just give a little touch to. I've got a little bit of a shading there. I don't think it's a big deal, and I know most people would never see it, but from time to time when we use these techniques, sometimes we can. So I'm just going to use my clone tool just above and just clone over that just to even it out just a little more. You can see where the clone source is coming from, and even maybe a little bit there. We can do anything we want just to make sure we have an acceptable result to finish. Now whenever we do work like this on an image, whether we do this consciously or subconsciously, I think most of us carry out what is called a cost-benefit analysis. What have I got to do? How much time is it going to take me to do it? And when I'm finished, was or is the image worthy of the time I've spent? But of course, once you get into these copy and paste techniques, you start to get faster and faster at doing them, and you get a little more efficient. So you tend then to have more opportunity to do the sort of repairs you've seen here and improve many of your images. Now I could literally do dozens of different demonstrations on a number of different images, but the techniques that we've covered here with two examples really covers everything.